So one of the issues with trying to be off-grid is what happens if you have to be away from the property for a few days, and during that time you're not getting a lot of sun, your batteries are getting discharged, and they eventually turn off. So you lose the some or part of your batteries enough that the inverter shuts down. So there's the 3 panels that I've got right now, and they're 560 panels. So in full sun, good conditions, I can get, I might get, I think I've gotten up to 1400 watts. And as you can kind of see, there's some racking there to expand. I do have a 4th panel. There's just not quite enough rack left for the 4th panel to get connected and mounted. They're just a little bit too wide. So I need to get that 2nd rack mounted, lined up, and all that kind of stuff. And I've actually got some more of these coming. I'm going to try to do maybe up to 7 of them, at least in one array. And they're in string. Now in this building that I've got, so there's the primary source of electricity. I do have a generator that will do, it'll do some. I mean, I get about 2,000 watts out of it. It's supposed to be rated for 6,500. But I'm lucky if I get about 2,000. But I can use that to recharge. But of course, I've got to be here to run the generator, to fuel it up, to get it started, all that kind of stuff. So what about heat? Well, here's my primary heat source. I do have a mini split, but of course it needs electricity. And if the inverter's off, then it's not going to run. And I don't depend on it, especially no more solar than I've got. I depend on this, which doesn't have a problem. Usually I put it down just above the pilot, and it'll keep this building, easily in the high 40s, if not in the 50s. But there is one issue with it. This building is really, really airtight. So this has got a protective circuit. If the oxygen gets too low, or the CO2, not carbon monoxide, but carbon dioxide gets too high, then it shuts off. Not just the main burner, but the pilot and everything. That way it shuts the whole gas system off, so you don't fill the place with gas. How do I mitigate that? In most places that aren't this airtight, there's just enough air leakage for that not to be a problem. So what I do, I have an ERV, an Energy Recovery Ventilation System. You see the 2 hoses here. What it does, it sucks air from outside, brings it in, so the outside comes in here, goes through essentially a radiator, and it exchanges the heat. Not the moisture, but exchanges the heat. So if I've got 30-degree air coming in, then it may heat it up to 40 or something like that, so I don't lose all the heat I'm generating. But the air coming out here is outside air that's been preheated, and then it takes inside air, blows it out, and then on the other side of that radiator, and that's where it exchanges. So I'm getting clean air, clean oxygen. That is enough to keep that thing happy. Well, the problem is that ERV runs on alternating current. So if the inverter's off, the ERV is off. If the ERV is off, then eventually the oxygen goes down, the CO2 goes up, and this turns off, and the place gets cold. Well, this happened this last few days. As you can see, there's snow outside. This is our coldest and stretch this year. And what essentially happened, oh well, by the way, I can crack the windows, and in a pinch, that's what I did the other day a little bit, especially since this had to run more often than normal. I just cracked 2 small windows on opposite sides of the building and got enough fresh air coming through to keep this going, and this can still heat it up. I mean, that's essentially what happens in a normal house or structure that's not as airtight as this is. You've got enough air leakage coming in around doors, around windows, around outlets, whatever, to do that air exchange. I also have a couple of different air quality monitors that I can watch. So let's look at the batteries. What I've got is a stack of 6 EG4 Life Power batteries. So first thing that happened is the state of charge of the stack got low enough, and for some of the batteries turned off, and the inverter, which happens to be, I'm just using a little 3000 right now. If the voltage or state of charge gets too low, the inverter turns off. If it can't talk to the batteries because the batteries have turned off, it shuts off. So what I had was 4 out of 6 batteries shut themselves off with a combination of low cell voltage, so at least one cell in the pack got too low that it shut off, and you'll see kind of a red light on this one, the alarm light right there. And 3 or 4 of them also got cold enough that the low temperature sensor was, one of the thermometers was triggered, and so they were off for that. Now, how do you fix that? So I was running on 2 out of 6 batteries. First thing you got to do is warm the batteries up, which means warming up the whole building. I don't have a way with my monitoring when I'm off site to know the voltages of the individual batteries, individual cells, or the temperature. The closest I can get right now, it's part of the reason, damn it, why I like Victron, is these Ruby tags. I keep a Ruby tag in the bottom, which should be one of the coldest points, and that talks to the Victron, and then I can see that on the VRM. I gotta put this back on. I touched it and I don't like sparks. VRM. But if the inverter's off, that means that Starlink is off, which means I can't monitor anything. That's one of the reasons I knew something was simply because I couldn't connect to anything. So first thing you got to do is warm it up. So you got to warm up the building, and since the thermometers or the sensors are inside the batteries inside this pack, it takes a while. It can take overnight for them to warm up enough to clear the low temperature. That has been done, but those 4 batteries are still off, and they are off because they had a low cell voltage. Now, these are the lower power, these are the ones, the version that doesn't have quite as much fancy stuff on it. So in order to really talk to them, you either have to use a computer program, or I do have the communication hub. And with the communication hub, like right now, main screen, I can see that there are 3 batteries turned on, and they're all daisy chained communication. The voltage of 2 of the batteries is 52.3. State of charge for those 3 batteries is 58%. Temperature is 14 Celsius. I've got 5.7 amps going into a battery, or into the stack. It's really only going into battery. I go down, pack number 1, which is battery number 1, is turned off, so you see everything is zeros. Cell voltages. Pack number 2, which is on, the voltage of that pack is 52.4. It's got 0.7 amps coming in. It is getting charged by solar. It's at 84% state of charge, 99% state of health. The highest voltage of any cell is 3285. The minimum is 3274. Here's the 4 temperature sensors in there, and I'm on version 3.4 of the BIOS. So that's pack number 2. There's the actual cell's voltage, which one is which. There's the temperature of each of them. Charging, CMOS is on, discharge is on, so it's working fine. Pack number 3, which is the one with the alarm. First thing is, I have disconnected the positive cable and the negative cable, so it is not electrically connected to the bus bars or anything else. When I disconnected those, I threw some heat shrink. I didn't shrink it down, I just put some heat shrink over it to protect it. I've got a positive lead, a negative lead to this little battery charger down here, and I am trickle charging that battery right now at just under 5 amps. It is at 4% state of charge. It was much lower than that. The voltage is 51.7. It was much lower than that. The highest cell voltage is 3254. The minimum was lowest is 3182. It was below that. It was 3051, I believe. So was the lowest one. It was cell number 8. Temperatures are all good. Let's see. Go back to pack 3. So here's the individual cells. Number 8 was my lowest earlier, so it's up to 3.84 now. So really, all the cells should be high enough to not have a low pack voltage. The cell voltage should be up high enough to clear that as well. They are all on 3.44. So the question is, and the way I'm charging it is just trickle charging. I have got this set to 54 volts, 5 amps, and it's currently putting 261 watts into the battery. So it's essentially trickle charging the battery. The question is, when is that alarm going to quit blinking? When am I going to get that low sensor? I mean, 51.4 is the nominal voltage. So when is it going to kick over and turn on that CMOS? Okay, so it's saying CMOS is on now, discharge is on now, so it should be good. The only problem is, if I'm at 51.7 here and 52.5 here, if I just connect the positive and the negative, that could be too much current, because you've got two batteries that are essentially almost fully charged, trying to dump into one that's only about 4%, and one or more of them is liable to trip. But I don't know when that alarm's going to go off, but it's saying pack 3, I'm above the nominal charge. I mean, it's taking a trickle charge. That's how you wake them up. It's showing no alarms, so I should be able to charge it faster if I had a way. Now, I've got these 20 amp chargers. Unfortunately, I've got them all connected up here. So this is really the only way that I've got to charge one battery. When the voltage gets close enough to the other ones, then I could put it back in and parallel it, and then I'll be up to 3 batteries. The problem is, I don't know how long that's going to take, and once I get that one done, I've got to do that for 3 more. I have to do this one at a time if I want to keep the system up and running anyway. The only other way to do it is to turn off the 2 that are doing good and Trickle charge the other 4 altogether at 5 amps. I mean, this is going to take days, especially since I'm not down here full time. If I was down here full time, I'd go about my business and be doing other things while this is working. But this may take days at this point to charge this battery up, and as it's charging, because it's actually charging from the other 2, because the 2 that are on are supplying the inverter, which gives me the AC to run this to charge that one. So as they come down and that one comes up, at some point when they're essentially the same, I can parallel it again. But then I have to take the next battery out, the next battery out, the next battery out, one at a time, and charge and wake them back up. So that is part of the fun of off-grid. Now, if I was here when all this storm, hang on, let me turn this around. Now, if I was here while all of this was going on, I could have headed it all off at the pass. As soon as I saw the batteries were starting to get low and we didn't have any sun coming for 2 or 3 days and all that, I just would have cranked up the generator, topped off the batteries. None of this would have been an issue whatsoever. But I had to be off the property for 2 or 3 days or more while the batteries were discharging. We weren't getting any sun, the temperatures were dropping, and I couldn't get down here. So that's going to be part of your, in knowing it's all coming in, you could do a couple things. You could shut everything down and just not worry about it. But if I do that, I'm not going to have heat unless I crack the windows, and the water lines and stuff could freeze. And so I guess part of the takeaways is, how do I prepare if a similar situation were to come up? If I can possibly get here, run the generator. My goal ultimately is to get a generator that can remote start. Either have the Victron system automatically start it if the batteries get, say, at 30%, or get down here, or some other way to wirelessly remotely start it, or just get down here long enough to start it. And I'm looking into that. Another thing that might help just a little bit would be that ERV system. Maybe get a power bank, kind of like a UPS, but not an actual UPS. It'll be beeping, although if I'm not there, it won't matter. But get like a Blue Eddy type thing and use it as a UPS just for the ERV. With the 2 fans it's got, it shouldn't take much of a battery bank to keep that running for days. And then it can always be topped off again when the rest of the system's up and running. Crack the windows. Turn the ERV off. Just crack the windows a little bit, enough to keep the oxygen going. Now the only thing is, if my inverter goes off, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I've ran out of gas. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to add more battery so that I can go longer on days without sun. The battery I'm working on is actually equal to half of this rack. Also, finding ways to get more details of the battery as far as individual cell voltages, stuff like that in the monitoring, but I can't do anything. So it really boils down to be here, run a generator, remote start a generator, automatically run a generator, things like that. These are not set it and forget it systems. And the bigger system, the more complicated the system is. When it goes down, the more steps, the more troubleshooting, and the longer it may take to get everything back up and running. I will say that at a minimum, whether you're DIYing the batteries, whether you're buying them, if there is a chance that you're going to be off-site and it's going to be getting cold, make absolutely sure your batteries have low temperature protection and you know that it works. That you've seen reviews and teardowns where the low temperature protection for that battery, that model, that release version works. I mean, I've got these little lead time or ampere time batteries. They do not have low temperature protection. There are some of the cheaper ones out there that say they do, but when they get tested, they don't. So I would not rely 100% on that, because if they get down below freezing and then solar comes up or you start the generator or whatever, you start trying to charge it and those cells are below freezing, the best thing that's going to happen is you're going to brick them. The worst thing could be worse than that. So make sure your critical systems have low temp protection and you know it works. And then be prepared for them to have to warm up to clear that fault so that you can start charging again. And have some way to trickle charge 5-10 amps in variable voltage. Have some way to wake that up. Now, some of these small batteries, what I've done before, fit the 12 volt battery, and the BMS, real cheap dumb battery, BMS is turned off. Sometimes you can take like an 18 volt battery or something like that, or another 12 volt lithium battery, and just kind of hit it, and that'll wake the BMS up. Well, the BMS is up and was already up. I needed that one particular cell voltage to come up high enough. If I could connect that 20 amp charger to it, I could start the generator again and I could be charging it with 20 amps instead of 5 amps. But I don't want to start trying to dig into all the wiring up here. It may be good, since really I never use more than 2 of those 20 amp chargers. It may be good at some point for me to undo one and have one as a standby specifically for this, although it won't trickle charge it. But do that, or have another one, have another dedicated one for this. But at minimum, have one of these other little chargers that you can vary the voltage on and use it to trickle charge. We'll see what happens after this and how long it takes. Hopefully before I leave today, I'd like to, before I leave, at least get this third battery, so I'll be running on 3 out of 6 batteries instead of just 2. So it's time that I need to leave for the day, and where I got to was the battery that I was charging up. I got it to 20%, and I kind of was hoping that once it got to 20%, that alarm light would go off, but it did not. The voltage is about 52.9 with the charger on, 52.6 or 7 with the charger off. So I'm just going to let that set for the night. The voltage of the other 2 batteries are around 53.1. So they're fairly close, but still, we've got 2 full batteries that are at 99% charged, one that's in 20. I don't want to connect it and start dumping a lot of power and cause damage. So I'm going to let that the battery I was charging rest overnight. That took from essentially 0 to 20% at 5 amps, about 260 watts. It took, what time is it? Took about 4 hours to do that. So that's going to need to be done for every one. The solar is, I've got a record day for the last few months. I don't know if you can see that, but right here so far I've got 5.3 kilowatt hours come in off of that larger array. Probably a little, and I've got a little bit off the other 4 that goes through a Victron charge controller, but for right now I'm focusing on this one. So that is almost 1 kilowatt hour more Then I've gotten on any other day, if I go to, so back on the 22nd, I got 4.3. On the 20th, I got 4.3. On the 18th, I got 4.3. And I got 5.3 today. So the sun is rising, getting less shading, more power, more of the day. I peaked out at just a little bit over 1500 watts. And right now I'm just went under 1000 watts. So that's more of the day and higher wattage. So that's doing good. Unfortunately, the rest of the day, I don't know how much room there is in the batteries to absorb. But I would have liked to have been able to go ahead and connect that other battery and let them start equalizing out, and then any residual generation go in there. So the next time I come over, instead of using 2 batteries to charge one, I'll have 3 batteries to start charging one. But so it is going to take, since I can't get down here every day, all day, it is going to take a few days. It may take a week or 2 before I have all the batteries back up. And this, again, it's just another reminder that it's better to keep the batteries from shutting off, from going down too low, if at all possible. It heads off a lot of different problems, and especially if it's going to be below freezing and you don't have a way to make sure and keep them warm, then shutting off for low voltage as well as low temperature protection, it's going to take a little while to get this all back up and running. Anyway, that's what it is. I got to go run a couple errands and get back to the house.